Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Polsky Personal Practical Enrichment Series. I'm Emily Bierman, and before we get started, I'd just like to request that you turn off any cell phones or pagers or other noise-making devices you might have with you. Thank you. The Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series is underwritten by the Norman and Elaine Polsky Family Supporting Foundation within the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation in partnership with Johnson County Community College. It includes topics which are not being offered anywhere else where successful local professionals share their knowledge to benefit you. Norman and Elaine Polsky's name graces the Polsky Theater, and we want to thank them for their generosity, which also brings you the Polsky Series. Norm and Elaine support organizations across Kansas City and around the world, enriching our community and communities everywhere. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge Norman and also the other members of the Polsky family who are with us here in the Polsky Theater tonight. Thank you, Norman. Thanks to the Polskys. Also, a quick acknowledgement of our TV and Carlson Center production crews for their assistance. Thank you very much. And now let's get to the packet you were handed when you came in tonight. This is for you to take home and share with your family. So on the right side, the blue question card. If you have any questions for our speaker during the program, please write them on this card. The ushers will come around periodically and they can pick these up, and then we'll get them to the stage so we can ask them of our speaker. Also, a green survey card, and this will allow you to give us your contact information if you're not currently on our mailing list. It will also allow you to give us a little bit of feedback about tonight's program and anything that we might improve, as well as suggested topics for other seminars in the future. So we hope you'll get that into us. Norman makes a practice of calling after every seminar to ask how many cards came back, so you don't want to be left out of that count. So thank you very much. Also, the postcard about tonight's program, which outlines what Ed Marquette will be speaking about. Ingram's Magazine, which includes an article written by Ed Marquette. It's on page 20 of the magazine if you'd like to take a look at it in a little bit. And then some other materials that Ed will cover shortly. On the left-hand side of the packet, first of all, a flyer about our next Polsky seminar, which will take place on May the 12th. AARP evaluation of Obama's health care program nationwide. And also, that will feature David Wilson, the Kansas president of AARP, and also Elaine McIntosh from Kansas City Hospice will be here discussing caring for your aging parents and others. On the pink sheet, this is Norman's investment article, and this gives you an idea of what he is invested in and his philosophies of investment. On the back side, you'll see a synopsis of the current mutual funds that Norman holds and their results over the last month. He wanted me to point out to you on the top of the vertical sheet that the 5-year annualized percentage return is how he evaluates how well he's doing. His goal is 20% 5-year annualized, and he wanted me to point out to you that he's at 21.1% right now. So that's including 2008, which we all know was kind of a challenging year. So if you'd like to receive Norman's article, you can send him 4 self-addressed forever stamped envelopes, and his address is at the top of either side of that pink sheet. On gold, some information about the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation, and we'll get into more about that during our program as well, just a bit. On green, information about Reaching Out from Within, which is an organization which emphasizes kindness in the community, founded by Sue Ellen Freed, who was one of our speakers on the Polsky series last year. And on the back of that green sheet, kindness quotes. And finally, on purple, biographical information on Norman and Elaine Polsky and a list of their 44 endowments. I'd like to also remind you that we do have books for sale in the lobby tonight. We have 3 different ones. Yes, You Can Achieve Financial Independence by James Stowers, the founder of American Century Investments. A book called Harry S. Truman, The Man Who Walked with Giants, and also Adam Bowles' The Truth About Investing, 10 Commandments for Building Personal Wealth. And Norman wanted me to share with you that this is the book he would have written, and he believes that a lot of the principles that Adam Bowles will tell you about in the book are things that Norman very much strongly believes in. Each of these books is $10 tonight. That is at least 50% less than you'd pay in the bookstore, so we hope you'll stop by and pick up one or all of them before you leave tonight. You'll notice that tonight's program is being taped for broadcast, and you can find us on Time Warner or Shore West Channel 17 or Comcast Channel 22. Links to the Polsky series broadcasts can also be found on the JCCC website at video.jccc.edu, and you can watch those at any time. And now let me tell you a little bit about tonight's speaker. Besides Ed Marquette's fantastic accomplishments, which you can read on the postcard that's enclosed in your packet, Norman wanted me to tell you a few facts that aren't known generally about Ed. First of all, Ed worked his way through Harvard Law School and graduated cum laude, and his wife, Ancy, who's in our crowd tonight, read to him and helped him do that. Ed is the attorney for the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation within the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation and has been involved in advising the Polskys since around 1977. Ed set up estate plans for Norman and Elaine in 1994 and continues to update those regularly. And Norman has had the following set up by Ed: a charitable remainder trust, or CRUT, a Crummy Insurance Trust, and we want to clarify here, this is named for the Crummy family who came up with the concept. It's not a crummy trust. So just so you know that. The Polsky Charitable Foundation, and also the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation, which is the benefactor of our series. 2 years ago, this is an interesting story. 2 years ago, Ed and Nancy were the Polskys' guests at Paradise Village in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, in a 3-bedroom suite. And every night, Norman swears, while he slept, Ed was working on the computer to close a deal with some Japanese clients. And every time Norm got up, there was Ed on the computer. So he wanted me to share that with you. Ed uses a computer to read and replay, so you'll see some of the technology Ed has taken advantage of while he's making his presentation this evening. And I think that's all that Norman wanted me to share with you. Norman also believes that every family should develop relationships with experts like Ed Marquette for legal advice, and it's also advisable to have a doctor you trust and a banker you can go in and speak with regularly. So with that introduction, I introduce for you tonight's speaker, Ed Marquette.
Well, thank you very much, Emily, for that kind introduction.
The first thing, we're going to be talking about really 5 very, very different subjects that are going to be, that are really not really all that closely linked to each other. That's, I suppose, not unlike the boy who came home from school with his a wide series of issues on his report card. He had 4 F's and a D. He had a D in geometry, and his father said to him, "Son, I want an explanation for this. What do you have to say for this report card?" He says, "Well, Dad, I guess I spent too much time in geometry." We are going to have a lot of different subjects we're going to cover. The very first one, might as well launch right into it. The very first one is privacy and social networks. If you have the Ingram's magazine, I actually called Ingram's for permission to reproduce this article. There is one little disclaimer. My first cut at the article that I wrote for Ingram's was too long by a factor of double. It was double too long. So they helped me cut it down a little bit so it would fit their space requirements. There is one sentence in there that begins with "and." I want to disclaim that sentence, all right? I did not write that sentence. I'm kind of picky about that. But otherwise, yes, that's my article. It is on page 20. When I called them for permission to reproduce it, they said, "Hey, why don't you just have 20 copies of the magazine?" So they were very kind to donate all these copies of the actual magazine itself. So on page 20, I will be covering some of the items that are in that article. I will also be covering other items as well on the subject of social networks and privacy. That really deals with social networks. Now, I know a number of you in the audience own your own businesses. You may be looking at this issue of social networks from the perspective of a business owner or of an employer. Some of you don't, and you may be looking at this issue from the perspective of an employee. The article really deals solely with the issue from the perspective of the employer. I'm going to cover both subjects so that there will be a little bit, hopefully, for everyone. Well, Social networks like Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, LinkedIn, and several others that I won't even name are really not for kids anymore. They started out that way, fun things for college students, but they've grown far, far beyond that. And smart business owners have now started to take advantage of these social networks. Well, maybe I'd better stop here. Being a lawyer, I like to define my terms so that we know what we're talking about. Not everyone in the audience may know what a social network is. I'll define it briefly. In a nutshell, a social network is a very fancy website which has an opportunity for people who want to sign up to have their own little personal space on this website. This space may be a place where you can put your picture, you can put stuff about yourself, you can diary on it, you can connect with your friends, you can follow what your friends are saying about what's happening in their lives, you can send email messages to each other. It's a way to stay connected, hence a social network. So why is this important to a business? Well, it's important to a business from a both offensive and defensive perspective. Let's look at the offensive, or the benefits that a business can derive from a social network. One thing that we start out with is targeted marketing. Gone is the days when just anybody would throw their advertisements on a television, pay big bucks, and hope that they were hitting the right audience. The real movement today in marketing is targeted, being able to get your message to the people that you want to get the message to. With a social network, it's very, very easy to identify, for example, you have a product that you're targeting women between the ages of 25 and 35 who have a college education. That information can be picked up instantly off almost any one of these social networks. You have a ready-made audience for your targeted advertising. What's the second thing? Is communities. You will find that businesses have their own sites on many of the social networks, and often what they'll do is seed these networks with people who will say nice things about their product. The idea here is to get a community. Now, when you have an ad on television, everyone knows, guess what? This is an actor who's being paid big bucks to say nice stuff about why his teeth are whiter now that he uses this particular brand of toothpaste. But if you have a community of real live people who aren't getting paid necessarily for saying nice stuff about your product, and they're actually saying nice stuff about your product, what a tremendous endorsement that is. So if you have fans raving about your product on these social network spaces, that's all the better advertisement and publicity for your product. Also, if you have a community where people are talking about your product, someone says, you know, this product would be great, but I really wish it came in chartreuse, okay? Well, easy to change your product to make it available in chartreuse, and guess what? Now your customers are your fans because guess what? You have been listening to what your customers have been telling you. Makes you a much better part of today's interactive economics community. There is another opportunity that we dare not overlook here, and that is the opportunity from your HR department if you're hiring employees. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is an important thing for you to do. What I'm going to tell you is it is a very important thing if you don't do it. Let's take a scenario that's not entirely hypothetical. HR department gets the typical resume, several of them, identifies 2 or 3 candidates, has an interview, goes through the typical references, and even does a background check. Everything checks out, this person is great. Then you hire the person, you discover that this person has a serious problem. He gets high on dope every day during his lunch hour. Now, you say, the CEO checks this guy out, goes on the web and discovers that all of this is actually on the guy that you've just hired's Facebook page, MySpace page, and you're the HR director and you didn't bother to check. The short answer to all this is that HR directors are regularly now checking MySpace, Facebook, and all of these social network spaces. And that's a word to the wise for people who put out on these spaces some absolutely, unbelievably, incredibly personal stuff. I don't know why they do it, but they'll find that that may come back to haunt them at some point in the future. All right, those are the things that a business owner can use positively. There's also a dark side to the social networks. There's the ubiquitous question that arises in different forms in all of these social network sites. And that is, I'll use the Facebook phrase, what are you doing right now? Imagine this now. If you're a pharmaceutical company and you have a clerical worker and she answers, or he answers this question, what are you doing right now? And she writes up, or he writes up something that says, oh, I'm writing this dull and boring report about this drug product that has all these horrible side effects, and I'm sick and tired of writing it. Okay, now, if you're a pharmaceutical company and you find someone is writing something like that, or you're a plaintiff's lawyer and you're looking for a bad drug, that's the last thing in the world that your pharmaceutical company is going to want to find. So, it's very, very dangerous to have even things that may sound totally innocent by themselves, but given the timing and given what other people may be saying, add 2 and 2 together and you may come up with some very interesting conclusions. Okay, there's another side to it. The social networks, as well as webmail and X drives, a number of places now exist out on the web where things can be squirreled away privately. And let's say that you're an employer and you have an employee that you believe may be engaging in inappropriate conduct of some sort. And so you're now going to try to find out what's going on. And you see a suspicious trail that leads to what appears to be some sort of a hidden place on the internet. It may, like I said, it may be a Gmail account, a Yahoo Mail account. It may be one of these social network sites. Can you access that if you're the employer? That's the question. The case was answered rather recently, in fact, on March the 30th, very recently, in a case called Stingert versus Loving Care. Kind of interesting to have a name like Loving Care. Well, here, I'll give you the factual scenario. I think it's an interesting one. Ms. Stingert worked for Loving Care. She was not particularly happy with her job. In fact, she thought she was a victim of discrimination. So she started writing to her lawyer, planning a lawsuit against the employer for discrimination. She was using a Gmail or Yahoo account. It was password protected. It was wholly private. It wasn't the company's email account. Well, ultimately, she quit. And she turned around and she sued the employer. Well, guess what the employer did? The employer hired a forensic expert to go check out Ms. Stingert's computer. And guess what they found? The treasure trove of email messages back and forth between her and her lawyer. And so the lawyers for Loving Care decided, well, this is really great strategic advantage for us, and they propounded various interrogatories based on those email messages. Well, Stingert's lawyer found out about it and had a conniption fit, all right? Went to the court, went to the bar regulatory authorities governing professional responsibility. And so, want to guess how the court came out? I'll tell you. The court decided that Ms. Stingert, because it was a private, password-protected email system, that she had a reasonable expectation of privacy. And that is the key phrase, a reasonable expectation of privacy. And the company had violated her right of privacy. It's called intrusion into her right of seclusion. That's the way the court articulated it. And so found the company liable. Still don't know what happened in the job discrimination case. That kind of fell out as unimportant after this faux pas. And to make matters worse, the lawyers who used that information were sanctioned for professional misconduct. So how do you solve this problem if you're an employer, or what do you look for if you're an employee? First thing is that expectation of privacy. Now, the privacy policy that this company had probably was written in the mid-90s, like a lot that many of us lawyers wrote for our clients. It relied on use of company equipment. Basically said that we have the right as the employer to monitor, to inspect your computer's emails, and we will monitor your emails, and we have the right to inspect the company's media and services. Those terms were not defined. The court said that because this was, as I said, a private, password-protected account, that email policy was not sufficient to divest Ms. Stingert of her reasonable expectation of privacy. And so, therefore, she had a right to expect privacy. There's basically 4 tests to determine whether an employee has the right to expect privacy. Okay? First of all, the first question that you ask is, number 1, do you allow employees to use email for personal purposes or their computer for personal purposes? I think in this day and age, to prohibit employees from using their emails, their computers for personal email, I just think that's not going to fly. In this day and age, it's too prevalent. The second thing is, did your policy say that the computer systems were subject to be monitoring by third parties? And finally, did you tell the employee, A, that other people might be accessing it, and B, that you might be inspecting her emails, including, and the court went so far as to say, including any messages sent over private, password-protected accounts. I'd be willing to bet that none of you here as employers have an email policy that goes that far. So the bottom line here is revise those internet use policies, because today's age, and using BlackBerries and using PDAs and using phones for texting and using iTouches and using, the whole gambit of things are all new. MySpace, Facebook, these social networks, even webmail are all things that really didn't exist at the time when many of these email and internet policies were written. So the word to the wise, beef up your policies. All right. Now I have a few quick points here in terms of practical tips to use in order to deal with social networks if you're an employer. And then I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the employee. All right. First thing to do is have your information systems department check to see how much social networks are being used. I will bet that some of you will be shocked to discover that a very significant number of your employees are logged in all 8 hours of the day. Now, they may be working on word processors or spreadsheets, but they'll probably also have their internet browser logged in to Facebook, MySpace, or one of these social networks all day long. So, first of all, find out, do you have a problem? Second, limit access. For some employees, you might simply say, no social networks while you're working. You're supposed to be doing work. There may be other employees who have a legitimate reason, your HR department, for example. If you don't feel like you can absolutely prohibit it, absolutely limit it. No employee should be logged in for 8 hours a day on their Facebook page. All right? The third thing, remind employees that they should not disclose what they're doing at work. In response to the question, what are you doing right now? The only thing they should ever say is, I'm at work, period. Nothing more, okay? You just can't afford more than that. Fourth thing is, remind employees that there is no such thing as privacy on a social network. Now, you'll get an argument there. There are ways that you can keep certain things private on a social network. Well, yes and no. Many of those things with a subpoena, I can actually discover. And I can actually discover it particularly if I've said in my policy, if you've accessed this from my company computer, if you've accessed this during working hours, then I can get to it and I can get a subpoena to get access to that. So that's also for your employees' own benefit. To the extent they think that they have privacy on these networks, they're going to put things out there that may damage themselves and may damage you as a company. So remind them that everything that's said on a social network should be assumed to be public, even though it purports to be private. All right. All of the same precautions about slanderous statements, about statements that are harassing, those should apply to social networks as well. I'm going to digress a little bit here and talk about so-called message boards. These are kind of community boards where people can post various things. We have a situation, real, changing the names here, absolutely true situation. A person came up with a bogus name, like we'll call it Anna Banana, not the real name, and posted a number of messages about his former employer. He did so using that bogus name, which was in turn through a bogus email account that was on a webmail account. And he thought that he had hidden himself so well that no one could track these clearly defamatory. I mean, he was calling the CEO of the company an embezzler. He was saying that the company was subject to federal investigation by the IRS and the SEC, all of which was untrue, but he thought he was safe. If you think you're safe, think again. We were able, through subpoenas to the ISP, to the topics in the message board, we were able to track down to that person's, what we call an IP address, right to his computer, right to his name, and so he is now discovered, much to his chagrin, I might add. Do not think that you can hide your identity on the internet. If you can, you're a really, really smart person, and you probably have a master's degree in electrical engineering, okay? If you don't have that, don't try to hide on the internet, because you're just going to get discovered. Okay. Now, what about you? One more thing. Also, remind your employees about the rights of privacy and publicity of your fellow employees. What may seem like a wonderful, harmless, practical joke caught on film and then placed on the internet, okay, it can get you and your employees into a lot of trouble. So your policy should absolutely prohibit posting anything without permission of the copyright holder or the permission of anyone whose name or likeness is displayed on the internet. All right, I'm going to switch now and look at this privacy issues from the perspective of an individual, okay? First thing is, don't use your Social Security numbers for anything except banks, brokerage companies, and the government. Nobody else has any right to use your Social Security number as an alternative ID. It's in fact, in lots of states, a crime for someone to request your Social Security number as an identification. All right? Don't use it. All right? Second, don't expect anything that's done on your computer to remain private. I've already told you how we can track through your IP address. Second, if it's on the company computer, just assume that the company is going to be able to get it, even if it's on a remote site. Okay? Now, Mrs. Stingert, Ms. Stingert, in the case I just described to you, she won her lawsuit. But I ask you, what would you rather have, your privacy protected or a big fat lawsuit? And I will give you a footnote here. My view is that in lawsuits, only the lawyers win. All right? I'm not a great fan of lawsuits. All right? Number 3. Actually, I've covered that. Don't use the company computer if you want it to be kept quiet. If you're using an ATM machine, this is something that few people think about. Look around. You don't want people lurking around. Not just so that they can see what you're doing, but, and I don't want to scare you, but there are devices that can be implanted in ATM machines and in cash registers, for that matter, that will actually read out the information that's being, like your PIN, that's being entered into the computer. So keep a wary eye out when you're using the ATM machines. All right. Last point is don't rely on identity theft insurance. This is a case of putting reliance in a place where you shouldn't put reliance. Think of it this way. Life insurance doesn't protect you from dying, right? It just pays off. The same is pretty much true with identity theft insurance. It doesn't necessarily prevent your identity from being stolen. It just pays out and helps you correct the problem if it is stolen. All right. Well, I told you a minute ago that one of the advantages, I think, of having all these topics is that if you get bored on one, just wait a minute, I'll switch to something else. I am now switching. All right. We're going to switch to the second topic that I want to cover, and that is who decides, you or the judge, and about your health care, about your family, and really about a number of different things that we didn't put on the postcard. This is really going to be a simple review 101 estate planning. You've heard over and over again, largely from the bar associations, you need to have a will. Do you have a will? Shaming you into getting a will. A will is a very good thing to have. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, telling people forget about a will. But the sad thing is that a lot of people, they did a will and then they stopped. That is the one and only thing that they did. A will is an important thing to have, but it is not the only thing. And of all of the possible documents, it's probably the least important. Let's talk about some of the reasons and some of the opportunities you might have. Let's say you have minor children. You can specify in your will who you would like to have custody of your minor children should something happen to you and your spouse, for example. It's a good idea to do that. However, merely saying so doesn't make it happen. Ultimately, the judge is going to have the final say-so. So what are the extra measures that you can do to ensure that your wishes are going to be carried out? Well, obviously, state who you want to have custody in your will. But even more important, I think, than that is to provide the financial means. Give you a scenario where someone you have picked to have the custody of your minor children are great. You think they'll be great parents, but they don't have particularly great means. And there may be someone else in the family that you may not think are going to be particularly good parents, but they're loaded, okay? And they have the wherewithal to fund a challenge to your designation. One way that you can help your case is to provide for a means of funding your choice. And you would do that probably, you're saying, hold on a minute, I don't have all that money to have a great big fat trust. You may have more than you think. My guess is that if you're concerned about the well-being of your children and your family, that you have some insurance policies. And you may not have designated, you may have designated your spouse as the beneficiary of that policy. Let me suggest, if you have minor children, you should create a trust, call it an insurance trust, and make that trust either the owner or the beneficiary or both of that policy. And then in the trust, you specify how that money is to be used for the care, the education, the upbringing of your children. Link that to the person who's going to be raising, that you want to have custody of your children, and you have a 1-2 punch that's going to be very, very difficult for a court to overturn unless the person you have picked is a real nut job, okay? And let's hope you wouldn't do anything like that. So, all right, what's the second reason to have something beyond a trust, or beyond a will, rather? And that is a will does not avoid probate. Now, you've heard a lot about probate and how bad it is. It's really not the end of the world, but it is this. It's time-consuming, it's costly, and it delays. If there is a way that you can avoid probate, it is a good thing to avoid probate. Will does not do that. In order to avoid probate, you're going to want to use a probate avoidance device. They fall into two main categories. One is the way that you title your asset. You may have a deed, for example, real estate, that transfers on death. You may have bank accounts where you have, there used to be called tot and trust, where you name someone who's going to be a recipient upon your death. You may have simply jointly titled property. Those are all useful. They all avoid probate, but they're lumpy. if you have several beneficiaries, you want cousin Joan to get so much money, you want your church to get so much money, you want your kids to get so much money, you want your sister to get so much money. And if you're trying to manage that by CDs and this amount and that amount and this joint account, that's crazy. That's just a crazy way to do it. There's a much better vehicle, and it's called an inter vivos trust. All of these assets in an inter vivos trust belong to you during your lifetime. It's just you, albeit on paper. You can do anything with that money. You can revoke the trust if you want to. All right? You can write checks on any of those accounts that are owned by the trust during your lifetime. But then, upon your death, if something happens to you, bingo, the trustee immediately takes over and can distribute those funds exactly the way you want and when you want it to happen, without getting the judge's permission, without going through probate, without any forms having to be filled or filed out with anyone. Okay, that's the beauty of an inter vivos trust. Now, there are a couple of actually there are three more documents that I want to talk about. One is the power of attorney, and there are two forms of that. There is a healthcare power of attorney, and there is a financial power of attorney. I'm going to add to this and say they should be durable powers of attorney. What I mean by durable means that they persist even after you. And let's think about this. You may be sitting here and thinking, well, that's a long way off. I'm a young person. Well, you may have elderly parents. And you may want to question them about, do you have a durable power of attorney? What happens if something happens to you? I have a real-life story that I will tell you that happened to me. Not as a lawyer, okay? I'm going to put on my hat as a consumer here for a minute. My own mother, in her estate plan, had named me and had named my brother as having power of attorney, durable powers of attorney for both financial and healthcare purposes. Last October, she went into the hospital, was in renal failure, had intestinal blockage, and needed emergency abdominal surgery. The doctor, when I found out about it, called and he said, your mother has renal failure. She has been required to have a valve replacement in her heart. She did not have that procedure. Her heart will not survive this surgery. We simply recommend that we put her at rest and in comfort and just let her go peaceably. Well, I said, wait a minute. I have her durable power of attorney, and there's some things that you don't know about. First of all, your diagnosis of a required valve replacement was wrong. We had her see some cardiologist here in Kansas City, and they said that was a misdiagnosis and that all she needed was not a valve replacement, but a pacemaker and some medication. And she's been doing well on that for the last 3 years. Thank you very much. No valve replacement. And if you would get that information, you would find out that her heart is in much better condition than you think it is. Well, actually, he took my advice, got the information, and he did the surgery. And to his astonishment, my mother actually came out of that he was going to just sign off as a corpse, came out of the surgery with flying colors. Her kidneys actually kicked in again and resumed 100% functioning. Now, the story doesn't end there. I wish I could say that everything came out just fine. But a week into it, after the surgery, in rehabilitation, she had a massive stroke. Unrelated to the surgery necessarily. It was this stroke, and she was comatose. That went on for 2 weeks. This durable healthcare power of attorney helped us get through some very difficult decisions that, had we not had that in place, the doctors would have had to have, on their own, either taken some voluntary heroic actions that I think we would have regretted in the long run. Feeding tubes, all those kinds of things that would have left my mother in a persistent vegetative state. We chose to leave things in God's hands, and he took her home on November the 18th. Everything worked so much better by virtue of having had all of the documents. And there's one more document that I want to talk about, and that is the HIPAA release. Many of these powers of attorney work best only when you have the information. And if you've ever tried to get medical information about somebody else, guess what? You're not going to get it without a HIPAA waiver, HIPAA. That is a privacy, well actually it was supposed to be a insurance portability, that's what the statute really, that's what HIPAA stands for, but it really turned out to be a privacy law with respect to medical information. What happened in my own mother's case is my sister-in-law is a nurse. So it was very helpful for her. She didn't really have the power to make the decisions, but for her to have the medical information so that she could talk to my brother and me about what the doctors were saying, to kind of get a third party's input, that was invaluable. So those are the documents that you need to have in addition to a will. You should have an inter vivos trust. You should have a healthcare power of attorney. You should have a financial power of attorney. By the way, those might go to the same person, but they might go to different people. The person that you want to make life and death decisions about your health in the hospital may not be the same person that you want to make investment decisions about your assets during a period when you can't act for yourself. All of these things have nothing to do with estate tax. All of these things have to do with doing things the right way, properly, without a lot of hassle, and without intervention by the courts. Nothing to do with estate tax. Right now, in 2010, hold on to your seats, there is no estate tax. Congress was so busy fooling with health care this last term that Congress forgot to continue the estate tax. So it ended. There's no more estate tax. And in fact, in Kansas and Missouri, since the death taxes here are triggered by the federal estate tax, guess what? There is no death taxes in Missouri or Kansas and no federal estate tax. So, if you were planning to die, now is a very good time. Well, of course, no one makes plans on that basis. However, there's a corollary to that, which is that, okay, since there's no estate tax, why should we file a Form 706, which is the federal estate tax return? You would think that is a total waste of time. No tax, why file the return? Not so fast. There are some advantages. All right? Now, the rule used to be that upon death, you got a step up in basis. Let me explain what that means. If Aunt Tilly had bought an asset for $50,000, and as of the date of her death or the alternate valuation date, the value was actually $100,000, then as of her death or the value or the alternate valuation date, that got a stepped up basis to $100,000. So that if you later sold that asset for $120,000, guess what? You paid tax on the difference, only $20,000. Without a step up in basis, you were stuck with a basis of $50,000 and you would pay tax on a gain of $70,000. Okay, big difference. So getting a stepped up basis is very important. You can get a stepped up basis by filing Form 706. When you file that form, if you're a spouse, you can get a step up in basis of up to $3 million. If you're not a spouse, you're someone else, you can get a step up in basis of $1.3 million. For those of you who are in a position, maybe you're an executor or trustee and someone in your family has died or will die before there is an estate tax, then there is a real incentive to file the Form 706 and to get an appraiser to make a very healthy, generous valuation. Now, there used to be a disincentive to do that. Why? Is because the higher the valuation, well, you've got to step up in basis, the higher the estate tax. Now, there's no estate tax. So now some of you are thinking in your mind, wow, well, I could get that Aunt Tilly's, maybe if I could get an appraiser to set that not at $100,000, but how about $500,000? Then if I sell it, I'll actually get a capital loss. Norman has a slogan that he says. It's something goes like this: pigs get fed, hogs get butchered. Here's the problem with that. We don't know when the estate tax will be reinstituted. It may be reinstituted, and it might actually be, shudder the thought, retroactive. I personally think that would not be proper. That would be repugnant to make it retroactive. It might even be unconstitutional for Congress to make it retroactive. But don't be surprised if Congress doesn't enact an estate tax and try to make it retroactive. So file the Form 706, get a solid, legitimate valuation, and move on down the line. I mean, the argument on whether or not there will be retroactivity, it's maybe the argument goes something like this. My point of view is that retroactive laws are ex post facto, and those things are unlawful under the United States Constitution. The other argument is that, well, no one is planning their death, as we joked about a moment ago, around this absence of an estate tax. So no one's is relying on the absence, is taking any steps in reliance on the absence of an estate tax. It remains to be seen what will happen. Okay, we're now changing topics. We're now going to talk about IRAs. Okay, IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. My first name is Ira. My parents named me before Congress came up with an individual retirement account. There are two types of individual retirement accounts. There's what I'm going to call the regular retirement account, and there's the Roth retirement account. I'm going to caution you now, if you're writing down questions fast and furious about your specific question about should I convert my Roth IRA, I'm 59 and a half and I have so much, please don't, all right? There are so many different variables in this. Unless I can sit down with you and ask you 4 or 5 questions, I'm not going to be able to advise you on your personal situation. Plus, if I do that and have that conversation here in this audience, everybody else is going to be bored out of their minds. So we'll try not to, and plus, this is a lecture, this is not legal advice. I should be giving you this disclaimer anyway. So, all right. The differences between the two kinds of IRAs. A traditional or regular, I'll call it IRA, really has 2 flavors. One flavor is where you get the deduction when you contribute. There's another flavor where you can actually contribute without getting a current deduction. I'm not going to talk about that one. We're just going to assume that one away for purposes of our discussion tonight. Because if you're not going to get a deduction, the Roth IRA beats the pants off of that kind of an IRA any day of the week. So if you're choosing between the two, here's the way that you look at it. There are 3 taxable times in the life of an IRA. There is the contribution, there is the solution, and there's the distribution. And they all rhyme nicely, don't they? At the time of contribution, in a regular IRA, up to the limits permitted by law, you get a current tax deduction if you're eligible. And of course, if you have your own 401k plan, etc., retirement plan at work, you may not be entitled to an IRA. So, but if you're entitled to a regular IRA, you can get a tax deduction for your contribution. That's at the time of contribution. For a Roth IRA, no tax deduction. You say, well, what's the benefit of a Roth IRA? Stay tuned. The second point is while the funds are growing within the IRA, while the funds are in solution, all right, like they're dissolved in the water, all right, while they're in solution, both the Roth IRA and the regular IRA grow tax-free, no tax. Now the third phase, distribution. Here is where the Roth IRA shines. At the point of distribution, there is no tax. So when you're retired and you're getting the distributions, there's a tax on your regular IRA distribution. There is no tax on the Roth IRA distribution. So you see, you have a real choice. Now, I have in my practice not had occasion to deal a great deal with Roth IRAs, and here's the reason, is that in order to be qualified to have a Roth IRA, your income has to be less than $120,000 if you're an individual, or less than $175,000. I'm using 2009 numbers now, for those of you who have your Internal Revenue codes out. Those were the numbers in 2009. And there are actually some phase-outs as you get to those top numbers. So if you're married, less than $175,000. If you're single, less than $120,000. In 2010, that's still limited. Although now those numbers float with inflation. So, for example, a married couple, their AGI, adjusted gross income, cannot be greater than $177,000 to have a fully functioning Roth IRA. Which should you have? Well, that depends, okay? The conventional wisdom has been if you're more than 10 years away from retirement, you're better off with a Roth IRA, because the value of the tax-free distributions beats out the value of the current deduction. There are a couple of assumptions being made there. One of those assumptions is that your income level is going to be the same, which it won't be, probably. With your retired, your income level will be less. You may be in a lower tax bracket. That would militate in favor of the regular IRA. But the other factor to consider is the taxes. Do you think the tax rates are going to be higher in the future or lower in the future? Now, I'm not a betting person, but everyone that I've talked to who purports to know is betting that taxes are going to be higher in the future than lower. We have incurred massive federal debts in the last 9 years, and we have been spending like there is no end of spendable income in the last year or so. So some way, somehow, all of that debt and all of that spending has got to be paid for, and guess where it's going to come from? Probably from taxes. Maybe the economy will just take off like a rocket ship and there won't be higher taxes, but maybe we will be stuck with higher taxes. So that militates in favor of the Roth IRA. Now, what's the nifty thing about 2010? You have all these limits, and there have been historic limits on the ability to convert from an regular IRA to a Roth IRA. For example, married couples, less than $160,000 AGI to convert, less than $100,000 for an individual. The beauty of 2010 is that you can convert your regular IRA into a Roth IRA, even if you have adjusted gross income of $100 million. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant in 2010. So if you have been thinking that taxes are going to go up, this is an ideal opportunity to convert your regular IRA into a Roth IRA. There's another benefit that I haven't told you about. And that other benefit is that you get to spread out. You have to pay the tax, of course. Remember, because you contributed income to the regular IRA in a tax-deductible fashion, if you now convert it into a Roth IRA so that you get it out of the IRA in a tax-exempt fashion, you can't get it on both ends. So you're going to have to pay taxes. But if your bet is that taxes are going to go up in the future, now is an ideal opportunity for you, if you have a regular IRA, to convert to a Roth IRA. As I said, I'm not going to be able to answer your specific questions probably from the podium, but here are some general principles. If in your estate plan your IRA is going to go to a charity, probably converting to and you have other income, probably converting to a Roth IRA is not a good idea. After all, the distribution is ultimately going to go to a tax-exempt organization. So you're not going to get a lot of benefit. Why pay tax now on something that's ultimately not going to be taxed anyway? So probably not a good idea. If you're 10 years, if you're under age 55 and you have a regular IRA, probably this is a good time to convert to a Roth IRA. If you're 70 or close to 70 in pretty good health and you have income other than your regular IRA, this is probably a good time to convert. And here's the reason, is that if you pay the tax now, you have the means to do it, okay? That's all good stuff, all right? The one disadvantage of a regular IRA that I haven't told you about is that once you pass 70, you're going to have to start making mandatory distributions, and those are taxable distributions. If you can take care of it now and you can get that deferral of your tax, then you're not going to be stuck with those mandatory distributions into the future. So those are the basic principles going forward on IRAs and converting from a regular IRA to a Roth IRA. What is the best retirement vehicle? Well, when it's all said and done, you know, if you have an opportunity, the best opportunity, and you have an employer that is matching your retirement contributions in a 401k, that's still the best. Because even if you invest as well as Norman does and you get 20% return, you're still not going to match that matching number from your employer. So every dollar you contribute, if your employer is going to match it, that is 100% return. And I don't know anybody who's been able to sustain a 100% return on their investment. So that's going to be the best investment. And then as between a Roth IRA and a regular IRA, well, I think you've probably identified the ways to make the choices. Okay, we are now going to switch again to another topic, and that is the topic of charities. Some of you are here, you are trustees, and some of you are here tonight and you're trustees of charitable institutions. Some of you are here and you are executive directors of charitable institutions. Some of you are here and you just care a lot about your charitable organizations. I'm going to talk to you tonight because I've had a fair amount of experience with Norman and with others in dealing with his 44 endowments, all right, with the things that are going to help charitable organizations survive, and why charitable organizations today are probably more under siege than they have ever been in history. Why is that? Well, one reason is there are more charitable organizations now than there have ever been. In 2006, in the United States alone, there were 1.5 million 501c3 organizations. That was up a factor of 100% since 1996. Since 2006, charitable institutions, the number of them has been growing at a rate of 1,000 per month. So more and more hands are out there for donations. And guess what's happened in the last 3 years? There has been fewer, and the donor pool has become smaller and smaller. More hands, fewer people to hand out. So no wonder charitable organizations are under siege. Also, another problem, some very high-profile charities have done some very stupid things. They've paid out exorbitant trustees' fees. They paid out exorbitant salaries to executives. And they have been engaging in a number of acts that have been self-dealing, that have been shoddy, inappropriate, and couple that with scandals on self-dealing. And what do you have? You have a brand new Form 990. Any of you who are familiar with charitable organizations know that in the last 2 years, your Form 990 is now 20 times more complicated than it used to be. It used to be that your accountant could handle it and polish it off in an hour or less. Now, probably your lawyer and your accountant have to go through with a fine-tooth comb the now far, far more complex Form 990. So that's the problem. What's the solution? How are charitable organizations going to survive? One more thing I want to mention, and that is we're now dealing with what's going to be a very, very money-thirsty federal government. I don't know whether tax-exempt status is going to be cut back, curtailed, eliminated. Nobody knows that. I haven't heard anybody suggest that yet, not out of the realm of possibility. But, you know, we've had cutbacks in the form of unrelated business taxable income. Don't be surprised if we don't see further belt tightening for charitable institutions. All right, how are we going to survive this? One way is going to be for charities to institute business practices, operate like a business. Because of the increased suspicion that charitable organizations have come under, the sort of lackadaisical attitude that some donors were willing to put up with, oh, it's only a tax-exempt organization, you really can't expect them to be run like a business, forget it. Those days are over. Donors that I deal with now expect charitable organizations to be very, very methodical, to be very businesslike in the way they conduct business. Now, here's a little promotion for Norman's foundation and the endowments that he supports. Farsightedly, I think, Norman has provided that his foundations are all encouraged to increase their level of education for the executive directors of the charitable organizations, to take management courses, to develop management practices, good, sound business practices. And that has been something that has been encouraged for a long time. So number one, encourage your executive directors to go back to school to get management training. Two, develop very good, solid management practices. Your boards of directors should develop oversight on what those management practices are. Third, invest. Develop endowments for the hard times that are going to come. If you develop really solid fundraising techniques and you develop endowments that you can squirrel away a nice sum of money, allow it to grow until you really need it. Another very, very sound practice for charitable organizations. And then once you have those charitable organizations, invest wisely. I have given you, if you're a trustee or a member of a charitable organization, whether you're in Missouri or Kansas, if you look at the two handouts that I've given you that follow the Ingram's article, one is Missouri and one is Kansas. I think Kansas may be on top. On the left, you will find what will likely be the next act that is going to be adopted in Kansas and Missouri. The Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act, or UPMIFA. All right, that is a mouthful for me to say and to remember. On the left are the provisions of the UPMIFA. The commissioners on uniform state laws come up with these great ideas for new uniform laws. Missouri and Kansas have both adopted what's called the Uniform Institutional Funds Act, a little older act, but what I want you to notice are two things. One is that in both Missouri and Kansas, no longer do you have to look to a very narrow list of the most secure, government-backed, totally insured kinds of investments. At one time, that basically, CDs is basically all that charities could invest in. And if you're on a board somewhere and they're telling you that, no, we can't invest in mutual funds, then I want you to pull out this handout that I've just given you. And you can look down on the right side of the chart, whether you're on the Missouri handout or the Kansas handout, and you'll look at the Missouri and the Kansas statutes. And you'll see right there that a reasonable person, that is the standard in Kansas, a prudent investor, that is the standard in Missouri. That's what governs how you are to invest. There's one caveat that the new law, if it is adopted in Kansas and Missouri, and it's brand new, the new uniform law, the UPMIFA, is that you won't have this one kind of funny hindrance. You will see in the Missouri and in the Kansas statute, there is a concept called historic value. The historic value is the amount at which the funds were contributed. If you're on the board of a tax-exempt organization, you need to check to make sure are you, in Kansas and Missouri, are you keeping track of those historic values? There is an equivalent in the Polsky endowments called the Polsky Permanent Reserve. It's a very similar concept. What I'm telling you is that in Missouri and Kansas, you may not distribute below that historic value, all right, unless the gift instrument permits it. So the question is, are your organizations keeping track of that? And if not, you need to. Either start doing it, go back and get that information, or if you can't do it, then lobby your state legislators to adopt a new law, because the new law, the UPMIFA, that law dispenses with the need to keep track of that historic value, or what you might call as basis. Last thing I want to talk about in terms of charitable institutions is a strategy going forward. I've talked about developing business practices. I've talked about new fundraising techniques. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I've seen in institutions do that's new, and I think it's innovative. And that is develop an enterprise, what's called a social enterprise. That social enterprise may look a lot like a business. And of course, if it's not related to the charitable purpose of your organization, it's going to be taxable as unrelated business taxable income, or UBTI. You don't want that. But if it's related to your charitable purpose, it is not unrelated business income and is not going to be taxable. So how can you develop that? Well, there you need to be creative and think of ways that you can raise money through businesses that are related to your taxable, to your charitable institution's purpose for being a charitable organization. I'm going to give you an institution that I'm familiar with that has done this very creatively. Heartstrings is an organization that benefits developmentally challenged young adults. What they do is they have a program that they call Goodie Delivery. The whole purpose of Heartstrings is to allow developmentally challenged adults enter into the mainstream public. And so what they do is, with the Goodie Delivery, their clients who participate in the program, they're actually out there pushing the carts through where you work. And it may be at the office where you work, you've actually seen this in action. And the actual clients are out there pushing the carts, selling the products, and interacting with the public. A marvelous, marvelous way to raise money for the program and also carry out the organization's tax-exempt purpose, okay? Be creative. The tax-exempt purpose of your organization may have within it an opportunity to raise money. The other one that I want to mention, and I'm going to stop on the charitable institutions here, and that's called an experience. You may have an experience that you can convert into a fundraiser that people will actually want to participate in. And I'm going to talk about a charity that I happen to be very fond of, and that's called Alpha Point. It's an association for the blind. We held a fundraiser and have held for the last 2 years an event called Dining in the Dark. It is an experience, and here's what it is. It is a banquet, just like any other banquet, with a big, big twist. And here's the twist. You line up at in the reception outside after you've had your cocktail, preferably not too many, because when you go in for your dinner, you will be you will be plunged into utter, complete, total darkness. What happens at that event is you experience what it's like being blind for a period of about 2 hours while the banquet lasts. It's called Dining in the Dark, and it is a real and genuine experience. Now, it's not the same thing as being blind for 40 years, but you do get a real sense of what it's like, and you actually develop a fair amount of camaraderie and teamwork with your table mates as you try to figure out whether what you just put on your roll was butter or salad dressing, you know? You just don't know. So that is an experience, all right? And your organization may have an experience that you can convert into a fundraiser. Be creative. All right. 8:41. I am supposed to shut up right now. All right? The last thing that I was going to talk about, Emily's going to come up here and take questions. I was going to talk about technology, overcoming handicaps with technology. All right? And I will just give you a very brief demonstration. You've seen me with my iPhone.
78% battery power. Status bar item.
Okay. When I went through college, I had a Braille slate and stylus and a tape recorder. That was all the technology that I had.
And you had ANSI.
And I had ANSI. I was talking about technology, my dear. All right. But that was it. Now I have a laptop and I have this iPhone. You've been probably seeing me flipping this thing around a little bit.
So anyone can convert. Not everyone can just start one. Should you? If a charity is beneficiary, no. Should you? If a charity is beneficiary, if under 55, probably yes.
Okay. That's what I've been going through. Those are my notes that I've had on my iPhone. This is a regular iPhone. If you have a 3GS, you have this very same capability. It has lots of things that enable me to do things that are really pretty slick. So in this, these notes are actually in an email message, and I have headings here. And so I can flick down, and I can go to the next heading.
5, heading level 1.
See, it said heading level, item 5.
Charitable organizations.
That is the heading of the topic that we just covered. Now, how do you access this technology? There are wonderful state agencies. If you know someone, whether it's an amputee or someone who's blind, there are a number of state agencies that you can contact. You don't have to do it on your own. They can connect you with organizations like Alpha Point, which is one of Norman's endowments, and they can help you and get you equipped, or your friend or your family member, to deal with whatever that disability may be. The technology, whether it's a new limb that's a bionic arm or a bionic foot, there are some incredible opportunities that are out there now. I'm out of time. I can't talk any more about it, so let's do questions and answers.
All right. Thanks to Ed for all of the information he shared so far. I have quite a few interesting questions here, so we'll try to cover a broad range of topics in the time that we have left. Okay. The first one talks about kind of a combination of the privacy issues you discussed as well as the technology. With all the smartphones and iPhones and wireless banking, Wi-Fi networks in coffee houses, cafes, motels, and all those kinds of things, how can you protect your information if really the only way you communicate with anybody is by cell phone and wireless internet?
All right. You need to be selective with the information that you share. First of all, a cell phone is not a particularly secure device. Let me back up and talk about the range of different kinds of technology that you may be confronted with. The least secure is the wireless. Okay, if you have a Bluetooth device, it's relatively easy for someone, unless you've found a way to secure it, and there are ways to secure it. If you're in a cafe and you're using a Bluetooth keyboard, then it's a pretty decent chance that someone might be able to pick up what you're typing in a coffee house. I wouldn't be using a Bluetooth keyboard in a coffee house unless you have it secured. All right. So wireless devices are the least secured. Next up from that would be your cell phone. That is also not a particularly secure device in terms of using it for communications. Your hardwired communications, there I would encourage you to be selective with what you share. If the very most public information that you share just on an email, I wouldn't be sending out my bank accounts on an email message, for example. I wouldn't be putting my social security number. I wouldn't be communicating by email things like things like my license number or bank account numbers or passwords. Things like that should not be put in an email because email is not a particularly secure means of communication. Good old snail mail in a printed publication is probably a whole lot more secure. If you need to send secure information over the internet, the best way to do it is to encrypt it or password protect it. And there are ways to do that. I would encourage you to check out the various ways of encrypting information that you're sending. So if you know you need to send information that's going to be of a private nature and you need to send it as an attachment to an email message, then you need to encrypt it. Backing up a minute, you know, a lot of people can now do their banking online, and that's fine, provided that your bank is providing you with a secure connection. But you should be doing that at home on your computer. I've heard commercials about people who do their banking on their cell phones. I don't know about that. And doing it in their internet cafe over one of those terminals or with a Bluetooth device, I wouldn't do it, okay? Be selective on how you use the information that you use. Pick only the more secure means for your more sensitive information.
Here's someone who actually said that their attorney asked them to send bank account numbers through email. So you would not recommend that? That's what I'm hearing you say.
I would not recommend that, okay?
Very good.
All right, no, do not send your bank accounts by email.
And maybe look for a new attorney.
Yeah, I would, yes.
Okay.
All right.
Here's somebody who read about a situation in the Wall Street Journal where a company fired an employee and was able to deny unemployment benefits because they were able to prove excessive use of the internet for shopping, playing games, and that sort of thing during work hours. Would you like to comment about that? Okay.
Well, I'm not an employment lawyer, even though I've talked a lot about employment and technology. You know, if you have a job description, an employee has assigned tasks of what they're supposed to do, and you have a good policy. You know, we lawyers always look for document. So if you have, like I said, a good job description and you have a good policy that basically says you're entitled to use the internet for some personal purposes, but you by no means are you supposed to be on the internet beyond a certain point, and you can find that the employee has violated company policy. Now, I suspect that why this person was fired was not because they spent too much time on the internet, but rather because they had violated a company policy that said you are allowed only so much or no time on the internet. So if you document your case right, if you have your policies written well, then by golly, someone who's spending all day, you know, doing their Christmas shopping instead of doing work, yeah, you could fire them. Probably want to warn them first. Probably want to have the ability in your policy to monitor what they're doing so that you know, in fact, that they're out there shopping instead of, you know, I would not rely simply on what the suite mate, the secretary or the lawyer or the accountant or whoever happens to be sitting next door says, you know, Susie's over there doing her Christmas shopping all day long. I wouldn't rely on that. I would make sure that your policy allows your IS department to check up. Now, it's fine if the suite mate says Sally's spending all day, and you take that information and then prove it simply by going on to the logs of what that computer terminal's been doing all day. Then you have hardcore evidence, and you have violations of the policy. You have a pretty darn good case.
Well, speaking of hardcore, here's somebody who asks about if an employee who has created a profile on a sexually inappropriate website mentions the name of their employer, is that alone grounds for termination? Pretty specific example.
The answer is, I hate to give a lawyer answer, it depends, but that is kind of the proper answer. if anyone can land on an inappropriate website accidentally. However, if your internet use policy has said, employee, you may not, under any circumstances, go to certain websites. And let's say that this is a place where I think the actual question was they didn't just accidentally land on an inappropriate website. They actually were there, they knew they were there, and they created a profile there, okay? And that is violation of a company policy. Then actually even creating the profile on that website, sexually explicit, inappropriate, that may be enough by itself, even without using the company's name, to terminate them. If you have also said in your policy, as I suggested earlier, don't use the company's name in any way that suggests that you might, a connection that you're acting for or on behalf of the company, and that's the way that this name is used. Now, if it's just simply, here's my profile, I work at Dillard's or I work at wherever, that might not violate the policy as I have identified it. But as I back up a step, if they're putting a profile out on a sexually explicit website that you have, that's clearly against your internet policy, that's your reason for terminating them, is violating the policy.
Okay. Let's switch gears now. Speaking of switching topics, we're going to do that again.
All right.
Here's somebody who asks, how do I get hold of a HIPAA relief form? What's the best place to find it?
All right. You can get them. Sometimes doctors' offices will actually give you a HIPAA release form. Your lawyer probably can give you one and probably send you one by email and may not even charge you for it, okay? I have a form I can send you. It's a simple little form. So your lawyer probably can give it to you and probably not even charge you for a blank form. But a lot of times that you can get a release form that your doctor, your physician, or the hospital will sometimes make those release forms available.
Okay. And switching topics once again, we're going to move to IRAs.
Okay.
So here's someone who's asking, if you're going to... You can't hear me. I'm sorry. I'll speak up. If you're converting a regular IRA to a Roth, would it be possible for this year in 2010 for you to contribute part of that value to a charity and therefore lower the effect of the tax to convert from the regular IRA to the Roth?
Okay. Maybe you ought to repeat that one again. I'm not sure I fully understand that question.
Well,
right?
there are a couple of questions here,
right.
I think. One of which is, if you're converting from a regular IRA to a Roth, can you contribute part of the value to a charity in 2010?
Okay. Well, you probably, in order to reduce your taxes. Well, I mean, the main premise of converting to the Roth IRA is so that in the end, when the distributions are made, that will come out on a tax-exempt basis. So if you're going to then name the charity as the beneficiary, you're sort of defeating the purpose of it because you're contributing tax-exempt funds to a tax-exempt organization. Now, however, if you want to make a charitable contribution of, let's say you have an IRA that you want to contribute some portion, let's say you have $100,000 in your IRA, and a regular IRA, and you want to convert 50% of it to a Roth IRA, and the other 50% you want to give to a charity, well, you'll have a charitable deduction for that $50,000, and to the extent you have a charitable deduction of $50,000, that will ultimately reduce your taxes. Although I think the net benefit, if I'm understanding the question right, is still likely not to be all that great, because that which you've contributed you no longer have, and you're no longer going to earn money on that. What you might do instead is take that money that you were otherwise going to contribute it to a Roth IRA, and instead contribute it into another kind of a vehicle, which is a charitable remainder trust. So you might want to consider that as an alternative, and that might work, because then you're contributing funds that were otherwise come out taxable because they're not going to a Roth, but they're then going to an entity that would in the end be tax exempt, and as a charitable remainder trust, you can then during your lifetime still use those funds. I'd have to think about that a little bit, but I think that would be a better solution.
Okay. How would you suggest people find an advisor to give them very specific information about IRAs or estate planning or investments?
If you're internet savvy, there are organizations of licensed financial advisors. Any decent financial advisor should be able to give you pretty straight advice about IRA conversions and about choosing between a Roth IRA or a regular IRA. I wish I could remember the name of, in Kansas and Missouri both have chapters for licensed, and you have to be licensed, financial advisors. I would contact a licensed financial advisor. They could help you. If you go to the internet, there are a number of wonderful sites. Okay, Edward Jones has a great internet site. I would recommend it. They have what they call a calculator, so that you can just go there. You don't have to be necessarily an Edward Jones customer. You can go to their website and run their calculator, and you put in your information, your specific information. Put in your age, your income tax bracket. You can put in how much you have in the IRA, what you want to do, and it basically runs a calculation for you and will tell you, you know, it's a good idea for you to convert, or it's not a good idea. So you can go on the internet, not necessarily even get an advisor, and get some pretty good information. And also, people who have those calculators, you can pretty well bet that those people are going to be able to help you. So, you know, your stockbrokers, those are also people who can help you with those decisions.
What would you say is a good way to ballpark the cost of preparing your estate plan? How do you know what's the right price to pay?
Well, okay. That is going to vary directly with the complexity of it, all right? If we're talking about if you're talking about a fairly simple will, a fairly simple durable power of attorney, a fairly simple healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA form, and an inter vivos trust, okay? All where you don't have charities and you don't have 40 people you're giving money to, all right? We'll keep it fairly simple. You know, you have a spouse and 3 kids. You probably should get all of that done for less than $1,000, okay? Ballpark. You add any measure of complexity, you throw a lot of real estate into it, you throw in other things, and you're going to go up. And it's going to go up in proportion to the complexity of your document. But pretty much simple template documents, that's a pretty good ballpark, yes.
Okay. Here's somebody who's asking about, can you be your own trustee on an inter vivos trust?
Yes, yes. That's the beauty of it. You can be your own trustee, and you can be your own trustee until death, and then upon death, you have a successor trustee, and then that successor trustee takes over from you. So literally, during your lifetime, the inter vivos trust is you. You are the inter vivos trust.
Okay. Here's someone who'd like you to comment on gifting.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay. That's pretty...
It's a pretty broad topic.
We all enjoy gifts. So if someone... I think you're probably talking about charitable organizations and making charitable gifts. Here is an excellent resource for you in terms of finding out what charities are available, what charities have good reputations, and that's the Kansas City Community Foundation. I can't say enough good about the folks at the Kansas City Community Foundation. The executive director is my former associate, Laura McKnight, so I kind of have a vested interest in endorsing it. But even apart from that, and that is actually the organization in which the Polsky Supporting Foundation supports. But the Supporting Foundation has a wonderful website that you can peruse, and it has information about virtually every charitable organization that touches Kansas City. In some way, you can get a lot of wonderful information about the charities before you make a gift. So that would be the starting point. I would, if you have a charity, you want to make a gift and you haven't really decided what charity, use the Kansas City Community Foundation to identify some pretty good charities, and then there's no substitute for good old face-to-face, one-on-one jawboning with the charity. If you're going to give someone money, you need to feel that you trust them. And the charitable organization, frankly, ought to earn your trust. Okay?
Ed?
Yes, sir.
Right here you have Michelle Davis. She is the executive director of the nonprofit Connect. They have 500 charities.
Okay. And Michelle's here tonight. Want to wave?
Michelle Davis is here from Nonprofit Connect, is what
Right.
Norman is saying. That's an organization in Kansas City that has over 500 nonprofits connected to it. So that's one other way that you can
Another
find
good,
charities to
another
contribute
good
to.
source. Another excellent source. Okay?
I was getting to that, Norm. I had it on the list.
All right.
All right. There's a couple more questions here about IRAs, so we're going to back up to that just a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay,
And this one is from our benefactor.
Okay.
And he's asking about a traditional IRA because it's too large to be in a Roth, but he's not converting to a Roth as he's going to leave it all to charity.
Yes?
So is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So he also mentions that people should let their CPAs decide if it's best to convert to a Roth or pay taxes.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's excellent advice.
Okay.
Because your CPA is going to know your tax status as well as anyone. So a CPA, whoever prepares a CPA is going to know. Now, your tax preparer may not necessarily be the person who is really up on IRA conversions, but certainly a CPA, someone like I know, Bob O'Halloran's firm that Norman uses, an excellent source of information on how and when and where and why and whether to convert.
Very good. Ed, that is the end of the questions for this evening. I want to thank you again for sharing your information with us. Ed Marquette, everyone. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you very much.